December 28th, 1908. The day after Christmas in southern Italy. The city of Messina is waking up to its favorite holiday. Children are still playing with new toys. Families are finishing leftover feasts. Couples are walking along the palm-lined waterfront, holding hands, talking about the new year. The air is cool but pleasant. The sky is clear. The sea is calm. No one knows that within 1 hour, 80,000 to 100,000 people will be dead. No one knows that 2 entire cities will be erased from the face of the earth. No one knows that the worst tsunami in modern European history is about to strike without warning. By dawn tomorrow, Messina will be gone. Not damaged, not flooded, gone. The death toll is higher than the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, higher than the Galveston hurricane of 1900, higher than the eruption of Mount Vesuvius that buried Pompeii in 79 after Christ. And yet, you have almost certainly never heard of it. This is the deadliest natural disaster in modern European history. It is one of the top 5 deadliest natural disasters of the entire 20th century. And it has been almost completely erased from popular memory. Why? Because the earth shook, the sea rose, and the world was too busy building warships and empires to care. This is the story of Messina, the city that died not once, not twice, but 3 times. Once by earthquake, once by tsunami, and then a 3rd time by history itself, which simply forgot. Let us go back. Let us understand what Messina was before the disaster, because only then can you understand what was lost. December 1908. Messina, Sicily. Population 150,000 people. But that number does not tell the full story. Messina was one of the oldest cities in all of Europe. Founded by Greek colonists around 730 before Christ. That is nearly 2,700 years before the disaster. For context, when Messina was founded, Rome did not exist. Athens was a small village. The Roman Empire would not be born for another 7 centuries. Messina had survived wars, plagues, invasions, volcanic eruptions from nearby Mount Etna. It had been ruled by Greeks, by Romans, by Byzantines, by Arabs, by Normans, by Spaniards, by the Kingdom of Italy. Through all of it, the city endured. In 1908, Messina was a commercial hub, the 3rd busiest port in Italy. Citrus fruits, olive oil, wine, silk, millions of dollars worth of goods flowing through its harbor every year. The city had grand piazzas, a cathedral dating to the 12th century, theaters that hosted performances from across Europe, a university, miles of waterfront promenades lined with palm trees and statues. And the people of Messina believed they were safe. They believed their city was untouchable. Here is why. For centuries, the Strait of Messina had been hit by earthquakes. The strait sits directly on a major fault line where the African tectonic plate meets the Eurasian plate. Everyone knew this. In 1783, a series of earthquakes killed 50,000 people across the region. In 1905, just 3 years before the disaster, another earthquake damaged buildings in the city. But after every earthquake, the people of Messina rebuilt. And each time, they built stronger. Stone replaced wood. Reinforced columns replaced weak walls. The city had survived 27 centuries. It would survive anything. And tsunamis? The people of Messina had a theory. The strait was too narrow, they said. The water was too shallow. A killer wave could not build momentum in such a confined space. The mountains of Sicily and Calabria would deflect any surge. The geography itself was a shield. They also had a saying, a local proverb passed down through generations. The Sea of Messina is a gentle sea. It does not rise against its children. They had no idea how wrong they were. The sea would rise, and it would not be gentle. December 28th, 1908, 5:20 in the morning. Most of Messina is still asleep. The streets are empty. The harbor is still. The only sounds are the early church bells calling the faithful to Mass. But something is happening beneath the city. Deep beneath the city, 160 kilometers below the Strait of Messina, the African tectonic plate is grinding against the Eurasian plate. They have been locked together for centuries, building pressure, storing energy like a spring wound too tight. On this morning, that spring breaks. 5:21 in the morning. The first tremor lasts 30 seconds. People wake up confused. Dishes rattle. Pictures fall off walls. Dogs bark. Horses in the stables kick at their stalls. Rats run out of buildings in the thousands. The animals knew before the humans. Then the shaking stops. Silence. Some people go back to sleep. Others step outside to check on neighbors. A few notice something strange. The sea is calm. Too calm. There is no wind, no waves. Just a heavy, oppressive stillness. 5:24 in the morning. The second shock hits, and this time it does not stop. For 45 seconds, the ground moves like water. Not side to side like most earthquakes. This one moves vertically, up and down. The ground jumps. Buildings designed to sway from side to side collapse instantly because they were never meant to be lifted and dropped. The ancient cathedral, the pride of Messina, cracks down the middle. The dome shatters into 1,000 pieces. Bronze bells weighing several tons crash through the roof and into the street below. In the poorest neighborhoods, the tenements do not sway. They do not crack. They detonate. Walls made of weak mortar and riverstone turn into clouds of dust. Entire families die in their beds before they can open their eyes, before they can cry out, before they even understand what is happening. In the working-class district of San Raineri, a 5-story apartment building folds into itself like a house of cards. 200 people were inside. Not a single one survived. In the Piazza del Duomo, the statue of Madonna della Lettera, the city's patron saint, topples from its pedestal. The statue weighs several tons. It falls directly onto a family of 7 who had rushed out of their home into what they thought was open space. They thought they were safe. They were not. Within 30 seconds, 40,000 people are dead, killed by falling masonry before the water ever arrives. But the earthquake was only the beginning. The worst was still coming. The survivors stumble into the open air. They are confused. They are injured. They are screaming. They do not yet understand that the ground was just the opening act. The sea is about to take the stage. Let us pause here for a moment. Let us understand what happens next, because it is crucial to understanding the disaster. When a large earthquake occurs under the seafloor, it displaces water. Billions of tons of water. That water does not just sit there. It radiates outward in all directions. In deep ocean, a tsunami wave might be only a few feet high, and you would not even notice it passing under your boat. But when that wave reaches shallow water near the coast, it slows down and piles up. It can become 30 feet high or more, and it moves fast. Faster than any human can run. That is what happened at Messina. The earthquake happened directly under the strait. The seafloor lifted and dropped by several meters. And all of that displaced water had nowhere to go except toward the cities on both sides of the strait. 40 minutes pass after the earthquake. The sea begins to retreat. Fishermen in the strait watch the waterline drop. Not a few feet, not 10 feet. The sea drops nearly 200 feet. It keeps dropping. Reefs and shipwrecks that have not seen daylight in centuries are suddenly exposed. Fish flop on sandbars that were covered by 20 feet of water just minutes before. Sailors look at each other in confusion. Some have heard the old stories. Some remember the tsunami of 1783 that followed the earthquake. They know what comes next. An old fisherman named Giuseppe later recalled shouting to his son, "Run! The sea is leaving! It always comes back angrier." They ran. Most did not. Most stood on the exposed harbor floor, staring at the strange sight. Some walked out to touch the shipwrecks that had not seen the sun in 200 years. They were curious. They were human. They were about to die. At 6:20 in the morning, 14 minutes after the sea retreated, the first wave arrived. It was not a curling wave like a surfer would ride. It was not a wall of foam and white water. It was a surge. A solid wall of black water, greenish black, filled with debris, moving nearly 90 miles per hour. Faster than any human could sprint. Faster than most horses could gallop. In the port of Messina, the wave picked up every ship. Passenger liners weighing thousands of tons, cargo vessels loaded with fruit and wine, fishing boats small enough to be carried by hand. All of them were lifted by the water and thrown against the ruins of the city. Some landed 200 yards inland. One ship, a small steamer called the Città di Messina, was found resting on top of a collapsed apartment building 3 blocks from the harbour. The SS Città di Messina was a 500-ton passenger ferry. 78 people were on board when the wave hit. Only 10 survived. The rest were crushed, drowned, or swept away into the rubble of the city. The fishermen who walked down to the exposed harbour floor were gone. Every single one, swept away. Their bodies were found weeks later in sea caves 10 miles down the coast. They had been carried that far by the force of the water. The first wave pushed 1 mile inland. Everything in its path was destroyed. Bodies from the earthquake, parts of buildings, furniture, trees, entire sections of street, all of it mixed together into a slurry of mud, wood, stone, and human remains. Then came the second wave, larger than the first, 15 feet high. It pushed deeper into the destroyed city. It knocked down buildings that had somehow survived the earthquake. Hospitals, schools, churches, all of them finally collapsed when the water hit. Then came the third wave, the largest of all, nearly 30 feet high, 30 feet. That is as tall as a 3-story building. It swept through the rubble and carried away everything left standing. Brick walls that had stood for centuries, stone columns from Roman times, church bell towers from the Middle Ages. All of it finally knocked down by the water. In the narrow streets of Messina, the water became a trap. Survivors who had climbed to higher floors of buildings were drowned when the water rose around them. Those who made it to the rooftops were swept away when the third wave hit. There was no escape. The water was everywhere. Some bodies were found days later in strange positions. A woman kneeling on the ground with her arms outstretched as if praying. A man sitting in his favorite chair inside what remained of his home. A mother holding her infant, both frozen in the mud. The water had placed them there gently after killing them. It was the only mercy the sea offered. On the mainland side of the strait, the city of Reggio Calabria suffered the same destruction. A separate wave hit from a different angle because of the shape of the coastline. Entire train stations were picked up and moved. Locomotives weighing 50 tons were found half a mile from the tracks. The railway line was never rebuilt in the same place. The tsunami did not stop with 2 cities. Waves radiated outward across the entire Mediterranean Sea. Scientific instruments in Genoa, 400 miles to the northwest, recorded the surge passing through their harbors. Even the Nile Delta in Egypt, more than 1,000 miles away, reported abnormal currents and a sudden rise in water levels. But the true horror was concentrated in the Strait of Messina. That narrow strip of water, just 2 miles wide at its narrowest point, became a killing zone. By 7 in the morning, the sun had risen. What it illuminated was not a city. It was not even rubble. It was something else entirely. The cities of Messina and Reggio Calabria were gone. Not damaged, not flooded. Gone. The harbour was gone. The coastline had been reshaped by the force of the water. Where there had been a peninsula, there was now an island. Where there had been a beach, there was now open sea. Where there had been 150,000 people living in a thriving port city, there was nothing but mud, debris, and bodies. Hundreds of bodies, then thousands, then tens of thousands. They were everywhere, floating in the receding water, hanging from broken walls, buried under collapsed buildings, lying in rows along what used to be the shoreline, arranged by the tide like driftwood. Survivors wandered through the destruction, 40,000 people injured, tens of thousands trapped under debris, no organized rescue, no communication with the outside world. The telegraph lines had been destroyed. The train tracks were underwater or buried under mud. Ships in the harbor had been thrown onto land, blocking what remained of the port. For 2 days, the survivors were completely alone. There was no help coming. No one outside even knew what had happened because the earthquake had cut all lines of communication. They pulled each other from the rubble with bare hands. They used sticks and pieces of wood to lift stones off their neighbors. They dug through the debris with bleeding fingers. They drank rainwater collected in shattered dishes and broken cups. They slept in the open air, shivering in the December cold, surrounded by the dead. On December 30th, the first rescue ships arrived. They were Russian warships from the Black Sea Fleet. By pure chance, they happened to be passing through the Mediterranean on a training exercise. The Russian sailors saw the destruction from miles away. A cloud of dust hanging over the strait. No lights at night, where a city of 150,000 people should have been. The Russian ships anchored in the strait and sent landing parties ashore. Their crews were the first outsiders to witness what had happened. Many of them wept at what they saw. Some refused to speak of it for the rest of their lives. Word spread slowly. King Victor Emmanuel III of Italy was at his palace in Rome when the news arrived. He immediately boarded a train and traveled to Messina. The journey took 3 days because the tracks had to be repaired as the train moved forward. The king arrived on December 31st, the last day of 1908. He walked through the ruins. He saw the bodies. He wept publicly, something that Italian kings rarely did. The king stayed for 1 full week. He organized relief efforts. He distributed food and blankets with his own hands. He wrote letters to the families of the dead. But it was too late for most. By the time help arrived, thousands had already died from exposure, from untreated wounds, from thirst, from grief. The official death count would take months to compile. Even then, no one trusted the numbers. There was another tragedy within the tragedy, something that most history books leave out: looting. On the night of the earthquake, gangs of thieves and criminals from Naples and Palermo crossed the strait. They came on fishing boats and small steamers. They came to steal. Not food, not medicine, not blankets for the survivors. Gold, jewelry, cash, anything of value. They cut rings from dead fingers. They pulled earrings from crushed bodies. They went through the pockets of the dead while the living watched in horror. Some survivors who tried to protect their homes were killed by the looters, beaten to death with pieces of wood, thrown into the harbor, left to drown. The Italian army eventually arrived and restored order. Soldiers were given orders to shoot looters on sight. Dozens were executed, but the damage was done. Not the physical damage, but the moral damage. The survivors learned that their fellow humans would profit from their suffering. In the weeks that followed, bodies were collected in massive piles and burned. There was no other choice. The winter cold preserved the corpses longer than usual, which only made the work more gruesome. The smell of burning flesh and hair hung over the strait for months. Fishermen miles out at sea could smell it. People on the mainland could smell it. The smell stayed in the survivors' clothes, in their hair, in their memory, for the rest of their lives. The final death count is still disputed today. Official Italian government records list 75,000 dead, but those records only count bodies that were recovered and identified. Independent researchers estimate the true number is over 100,000. Some historians believe it may be as high as 120,000. No one will ever know for certain. The ruins were too vast, the bodies too numerous. Entire families were wiped out, with no one left to report them missing. Whole neighborhoods vanished without a single survivor to count the dead. The survivors were resettled. Some stayed and rebuilt Messina on top of the old city. But the new Messina was not the same. It could not be. The new city was built with earthquake-resistant construction, wider streets, stronger foundations, modern engineering. But the old Messina, the ancient Messina, the Messina that had survived for 2,700 years, was buried forever. Entire neighborhoods that had stood for centuries, Greek temples, Roman baths, Byzantine churches, medieval walls, all of it crushed and covered by the rubble of 1908. Archaeologists today believe that significant portions of the ancient city remain buried under the modern city, waiting to be discovered. Today, if you visit the Strait of Messina, you can still see evidence of the tsunami. The coastline is different now, engineered for safety with seawalls and breakwaters, but the memory remains. Fishermen still speak of the morning the sea retreated. Old buildings that survived the disaster still have markings showing how high the water reached. 12 meters in some places, nearly 40 feet above sea level, higher than a 3-story building. The 1908 Messina earthquake and tsunami remains the deadliest natural disaster in modern European history. More than 100,000 lives lost, 2 entire cities erased, and yet almost nowhere in American textbooks, almost never mentioned in English language documentaries, almost completely forgotten by the English-speaking world. Why? Because World War I broke out just 6 years later. The world moved on. The dead of Messina were buried beneath headlines about Sarajevo, the Western Front, the rise and fall of empires. 4 years of industrial slaughter made the natural disaster of 1908 seem small by comparison. Messina became a footnote, a statistic in a history book, a disaster that had no famous survivors, no Hollywood movie, no survivor memoirs translated into English, no enduring place in global memory. But the dead do not care about headlines, and the sea does not care about memory. The Strait of Messina is still there. The fault line is still active. Seismologists say another major earthquake in the region is not a matter of if, but when. The only questions are how large, how deep, and whether anyone will remember what happened the last time the earth jumped and the sea came for revenge. This is the story that history left behind. This is the disaster that had no headlines. This is the Messina Tsunami. December 28, 1908. The morning 100,000 people died and the world barely noticed. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. This is a story that almost no one is telling. The production team spent dozens of hours researching the historical records, reconstructing the earthquake and tsunami with artificial intelligence, and verifying every single fact you just heard. And now, you are one of the few people in the English-speaking world who knows the truth about the worst tsunami in European history. Here is what I want you to do next. Every single one of these actions helps the algorithm understand that this history matters. First, hit the like button. Not for me, for the 100,000 people who died on that cold December morning and were never remembered. The like button tells YouTube that this content is valuable. It tells the algorithm to recommend this video to more people. One click from you could help someone else discover this forgotten disaster. Second, subscribe to the channel. Tap the subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss what comes next. We are rebuilding forgotten disasters with artificial intelligence so they are never erased again. Next week, we are releasing the Krakatoa tsunami video. 36,000 dead. You know the volcano. You do not know the wave. Do not miss it. Third, and this is the most important, leave a comment below. I read every single comment, everyone. Here is my question for you. Before watching this video, had you ever heard of the Messina Tsunami? Answer with a single word, yes or no. That is it. Just yes or no. And if you want to go further, tell me which forgotten disaster I should reconstruct next. Is it the Lisbon tsunami of 1755? 50,000 dead. Changed Western philosophy forever. Is it the Storegga tsunami that drowned an entire lost country 8,000 years ago? Is it the Enchunada tsunami, where 31,000 died and the samurai could not stop the water? Put your answer in the comments. Your voice decides what we cover next. The sea does not forget, neither should we. See you in the next one.